do, I want to briefly share with you the deliberations of the working groups that we've been having over the past 3 days. At some point, slides will come up, but I'll quickly go through them. The first working group is the one on strategic realignment in the Middle East. It was convened by Steve Simon and Gregory Gause. They concluded that among the United States regional allies, there is a mistrust of U.S. motives and confusion about ultimate U.S. goals. The debates within the United States about tactics and strategy fuel confusion about the direction of U.S. policy. There is a sense of weariness and skepticism in the United States about whether investment in the region pays off. Although serious, these differences are typical of alliances, and there's no real talk of dramatic realignment. Regional allies of the United States are not suggesting it, and the United States itself is not seeking it. The allies have adapted to U.S. restraint by their own independent action, for example, in Syria and Yemen, largely supported by the United States. In the next working group, convened by Shadi Hamid and myself, we looked at the impact of the Arab uprisings on the next generation of Islamists. So we gathered a group of young Islamists from mainstream Islamist parties from around the region, including Tunisia, Morocco, Kuwait, Egypt, and Turkey, to see how they were reacting to political events in the region. The participants found it challenging to identify commonalities between them because of the dramatically different political contexts in which they operate. There is a major distinction between Islamist groups in gradualist contexts, like in Tunisia or in Morocco, and those in a more revolutionary context, like in Egypt. The mainstream Islamist groups still see democratic elections and their participation in them as essential to the identity of the movement and not just a means for attaining political power. This is fundamental to who they are. This, however, raises the question, in the absence of elections or not being allowed to participate in them, what does Islamist success actually look like? Finally, the desire for popular support distinguishes Muslim Brotherhood-style Islamist parties from Salafist political parties and from jihadist groups like ISIS. But the political success of ISIS and the closing of outlets for peaceful activism have increased the appeal of radicalism among some young Islamists. In the next group that was deliberating on how to counter the propaganda of ISIS, they found that a priority should be given to building open source communities to match the volume of ISIS propaganda. So it's not just a matter of producing more material, there has to be a place for people to come together and collaborate. The anti-ISIS network should enhance opportunities for sustained one-on-one engagements, replicating individualized appeals made by ISIS recruiters themselves. Finally, governments and non-governmental networks need to invest in high-quality, compelling conflict zone footage, including personal testimonies of people who have left the organization that can be used by others who are communicating against ISIS. Finally, in the working group to counter violent extremism that seeks to launch an initiative in the United States to do so, they found that efforts to counter violent radicalization in the United States should be led by the concerned communities themselves, not by law enforcement, which can be counterproductive. The group recognized the need to raise awareness about the benefits of comprehensive community empowerment as a means of promoting public safety. And finally, the organizers are developing hybrid methods of funding for safe spaces, the name of the initiative that they're launching, including identifying private foundation grants and community-based crowdsourcing. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Tamara Wittes, the Director of the Center on Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution, to offer some concluding thoughts.
Good morning, everyone. Let me start by thanking Will so much for that summary. And I want to give special thanks to each of the conveners of our working groups and our action group. In addition to these public plenary discussions, the hallway conversations that I've been privileged to witness over the last 3 days, it is the quiet conversations that take place over many, many hours in these working groups where a lot of the magic happens. And I think that, as Will's summary shows us, although many questions were not fully resolved, that is the heart of our dialogue here at the U.S. Islamic World Forum every year. And I'm grateful to each of our conveners for making that possible and making it such a success. It is challenging to try and summarize in just a few minutes the array of themes and conversations that we've participated in. But I have to say that if I were to try and put it all into a slogan, I think the biggest idea that I took away from this year's discussion at the U.S. Islamic World Forum is encapsulated in the slogan, "Think globally, act locally." Now, that has connotations that I think reflect the fact that some actors in the region that we think of as the most radical, the most destructive, are thinking globally and acting locally. But I think we have also uncovered throughout our dialogue the many opportunities that we have, government and civil society, working together and working independently, to look at the global security challenges, the regional security challenges that we face, and to engage with them as constructively as possible at the local level. But really, what I take away in this slogan, "Think globally, act locally," is that there is no longer, when we look at the challenges that we face together in the Middle East and in the broader Muslim world, there's no longer a clear distinction between domestic and foreign, between inside and outside. We are interpenetrated in a way that we must recognize and reckon with. I think we heard a lot about the interaction between regional power struggles and local grievances, the ways in which deficits or failures at the local level to support inclusion, pluralism, and human development create vulnerabilities within our societies that extremists can exploit. We've talked about the ways that regional players wage their geopolitical power struggle in the arenas of local conflicts. Another theme that ran through our conversations was the long echo that older events, past events, have on the developments we are grappling with today, the unintended consequences of earlier policies by governments in the region and governments in the West. We talked about the ripple effects from the Iranian Revolution, the Lebanese Civil War, the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and the contributions those long ago events have made to the vicious sectarian tensions that we see today in many places. It reminds us that the decisions before us today and the decisions that our political leaders will make in the coming weeks and months in Syria, in Yemen, that these decisions will have long-term profound consequences that we cannot fully predict or prepare for. And that is a sobering but necessary insight. Another theme I've heard in many of our conversations is that given the degree of disintegration that we see in parts of the region and the fear expressed about further disintegration, we must recognize that the escalation of conflict, but also the resolution of conflict, we must recognize that radicalization and de-radicalization will be determined not only by external intervention, not only by the high policy decisions, of governments, but also by societal forces, by the media, by civil society organizations, by non-state actors. For example, we heard from Bernardino Leon the other day that although the United Nations Security Council is united in its approach to conflict resolution in Libya, that is insufficient in the face of a common approach here in the region to conflict resolution in Libya. We heard as well in our sessions that sectarianism is driven, yes, partly by the tone set by governments, but then exacerbated by media, by forces on social media in ways that echo and expand sectarian views. And as our working groups have been discussing, radicalization by ISIS, online, long distance, can most effectively be countered often not by government, but by community leaders, by the private sector, by civil society. And what this insight suggests to me is that although we may still have different diagnoses of the conflicts that we are facing in regional security, although we may see the geopolitics differently on certain issues, we know that to stanch the flow of blood in this region, to ameliorate conflicts, to stabilize the region, we must work together. Those of us from the West, those of us from the Muslim world, those of us who are public officials, and those of us who work in civil society and the private sector, we must cooperate. We must work collaboratively to end wars, to fight extremism, to promote coexistence and pluralism, if we are to rescue the regional order from the forces of disintegration. The necessity of combined effort underscores the importance of the dialogue that we have underway in the Islamic World Project at Brookings and that we have had underway over the last 3 days here at the forum. And as someone remarked in one of our earlier sessions, dialogue in the face of difference is not just about talking, it's about listening. Every year when I come to this forum, which I have been doing now for more than a decade, I relish the opportunity to listen to all of you, to listen to voices from Muslim communities in the Middle East, in the United States, all over the world. There is not one single Muslim view, one single Arab view, one single American view on the questions that we have been debating. There is a rich diversity of voices in this room, and it has been evident in all of our conversations. And as we have discussed, though American policy is often perceived here in the region through one dimension, through the exercise of military power, we have had good reminders throughout our conversations about the need to elevate and highlight the other dimensions of U.S. policy in the region, from bold diplomatic leadership to trade and investment to cultural exchange. So I am grateful as we end these 3 days of discussions, as I am grateful every year for the opportunity to listen and learn from you and to advance our dialogue and advance our cooperation. I come away from our discussions here resolved on the urgency of advancing that dialogue and building collaborative effort, the U.S. and the Muslim world, government and civil society, to resolve conflict and stabilize the region. Thank you so much, and thank you to our partners in the State of Qatar for their cooperation in putting this forum together. I'd like to invite now, on behalf of the government of the State of Qatar, my partner and close friend, Ambassador Mohamed Al-Rumaihi, Assistant Minister in the Foreign Ministry, for his closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
شكرا تمارا.
Please use your microphones. Bismillah.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, distinguished guests, esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my gratitude and happiness to meet you once again this year in this 12th U.S. Islamic World Forum. And I would like to thank you very much for participating in this very forum. And I hope that it was able to lead to more cooperation and tolerance and acceptance of the other between the different Islamic countries and the United States of America, and also to achieve the objectives based on which we have started organizing this very conference for 12 years. We started in 2003, and we are now in the 12th edition of this very forum. His Excellency Prime Minister and Minister of Interior has expressed a number of visions and ideas about fears and concerns in the region and what the Islamic world and Muslims face in political, economic, and developmental and human security challenges, and also the need to find the just solutions that can be implemented to preserve the security and stability and affluence in the Islamic world and also the world at large. So the consolidation of distinctive relations is a necessity in order to continue with our work, in order to reinforce our relations and to base them on bases of comprehension and dialogue, having an active partnership with regard to the different topics in achieving security and peace in light of the circumstances that we have in the Middle East and which has aggravated the situation of divisions that we have in the world today. This dialogue should be a very good image of good cooperation in order to solve pressing issues. And also the need to achieve peace is a feeling and an aspiration for all Islamic countries. The catastrophe of the Syrian people is aggravating due to the fact that the Security Council is not standing very forcefully in order to protect the Syrian people. And regions of conflict have led to having a number of terrorist organizations, and this is one of the challenges that the Islamic world and the Middle East is facing. We are confronting, and we still do, a number of challenges that are imposing ourselves and on the program of this very forum, which is terrorism and religious extremism, sectarianism, peace in the Middle East, sustainable development, justice, the rule of law, and most importantly is political reform. I would like here to pose a number of questions. First, has the capability been reinforced in order to contain the crises and also to confront the catastrophes and crises in the Islamic world and the world at large? Are the foreign interferences in the region, are they going to lead to positive results? Thirdly, was the Arab Spring successful in leading to successful governments? Is the American role being successful in stability and balance in the region? These are a number of questions that are still being posed to us and on this very forum here. We have noticed that there are so many other fields that needs to be discussed, such as education, culture, sport, and how we can coordinate and cooperate for us to be able to look at the education of the other, the rights of the other in the different fields and spectrums. In this very forum, we have seen many heads of states, heads of ministries, scholars, officials from the different parts of the Islamic world. We have seen also members of the Senate and ministers, decision makers in the United States of America also have taken part in this very forum. And we're still aspiring, and we were expecting to have a very high expressive American presence who in this very forum, in the very sessions of this forum. This forum is a very important opportunity in order to exchange ideas and to look at the different trends available. I would like to thank all the organizers. I would like to thank the Brookings Institute in Washington and the BDC here in Doha, my friend Tamara, the different members, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the State of Qatar, mainly the permanent committee, organizing committee, Mr. Abdullah Fakhru, the head of the committee, the assistant prime minister, Mr. Rashid Al Khalifa, who is not here today in the State of Qatar. I would like to reiterate my thanks, my gratitude to all those who have presented a paper, an idea, or being present here in this very forum. And I would like to reiterate that the State of Qatar is going to keep on being keen on hosting this very wonderful forum. I wish you a very safe journey back home. I wish you all success in your deliberations. I wish to meet you once again next year, inshallah, with the will of God, and in the next forum. And may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Rumaihi, for your remarks and for your support over the years. I'd also like to thank the Qatari government for its continuing partnership with Brookings to hold this annual event, especially His Highness the Emir, His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah bin Nasser Al Thani, the Prime Minister and Minister of Interior, His Excellency Dr. Khalid Al Attiyah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Mr. Rashid bin Khalifa Al Khalifa, the Minister's Assistant for Services and Follow-up Affairs, His Excellency Sheikh Mohamed bin Abdullah Al Thani, the Minister's Assistant for International Cooperation Affairs. A special thanks to Ambassador Abdullah Fakhru, the Chief Executive Officer of the Permanent Committee for Organizing Conferences, and his staff. I'd also like to thank the great folks at Zoom who helped put together all of the sets and handling all the audio for the event. They've done a great job. I'd like to thank the personnel at Brookings, especially Salman Sheikh and his team at Brookings Doha. Thank you also to Tamara Wittes and her staff at the Center for Middle East Policy, and Gail Chalif and her communications team from the Foreign Policy section at Brookings. And a thanks also to Bruce Jones for making the trip this year. It's great to have you. And finally, a thanks to my staff at the Islamic World Project, Ann Peckham, Beth Pierce, Christine Anderson, and Nufa Sadiq for all of their help in putting this together. And finally, a thank you to all of our participants. Without you, our forum would not happen. And thank you all for making it such a great success this year. That concludes the 12th Annual Islamic World Forum. For those of you staying, Brookings Doha will be putting on an event this evening at 5 in the hotel in Salwa 2 on U.S. GCC cooperations. For the rest of you, safe travels.